You're listening to the Rise to Thrive podcast with your hosts, Linda Tate and Amelia Travis. Rise to Thrive is your life resource for manifestation, wellness, and abundance. Tune in weekly so you can thrive daily. This week's episode coming at you.
Good day, Rise to Thrivers. Welcome to episode 11, Nourishment. You are alive with your hosts, Amelia Travis.
Good morning, friends.
And I'm Linda Tate.
Afternoon, evening. Hi. We're so glad you're here.
Thanks for tuning in. Today's topic is one that is near and dear to our hearts in different ways, and we hope to share our experiences and some tidbits that will help you thrive.
Nourishment. How does the word make you feel? I want to invite you right now to take a little check-in around the word and just notice what comes up. When Linda invited me to talk on this topic this morning with her, my immediate reaction was, I don't think I'm the right person to talk about that, which came out of a place of, a little bit of inadequacy and insecurity that I'm not an expert on this topic, right? I'm obviously doing all right because I'm still alive. I have managed to keep myself alive for 33 years on this beautiful planet. But when it comes to how I nourish myself, I think as an addict and as someone who's dealt with disordered eating, and even now as someone who's a professional in the yoga space, there feels like there's a lot of expectation around nourishing myself correctly or properly or in a way that is, admirable.
Like pressure.
Yeah, there feels like there's some pressure. So if that comes up for you, first, I just want to say, what up, homie? You're not alone. I'm right there with you. I ate pizza last night, and it was not vegan pizza, and I'm not vegan, so that makes sense. But so whatever it is, if you have some vices that immediately come up when you think about nourishment, that's cool, man. Don't sweat it. Stay with us for this talk, and we'll talk about nourishment on all the levels and how it's not just about what you're eating. It is about how you're caring for yourself overall. And in fact, I would say that how you are treating yourself in terms of just kindness is part of nourishment too.
And if you're having fun with it, like if you ate that pizza and you're like, I love pizza, this is so fun, this is so good, like you're nourishing yourself at such a deep level. When this turns into like the guilt shame game of like, fuck, I'm having pizza, oh my gosh, what, I'm not vegan, I'm vegan. It's a totally different energy of the intake. And that's been
mine was not a happy pizza party, just so you know. It was like our 2-year-old is going to like murder us. Like we literally cannot take another day of him whining and crying. It's been a long ass weekend and mama has a shit ton of schoolwork to do, and somebody just order some freaking pizza so we can put food in our bodies so we can just move on to the next thing. So that's an example of like, we're all going to face moments and times and decisions where like we're not making the choice out of what is optimal nourishment. But then even when we make that choice, Linda, like I love what you're saying, which is then you still have the opportunity of how you're going to frame it. And is it going to be easy and fun? And are you going to choose to receive all of the nutrients available in your
how long do you think you're going to live to be if you had to take a guess? Like what would be your goal lifelong?
The longevity of the women in my family is pretty remarkable and consistent. So
give me a number. I want a number.
I'm going to probably live to 90 unless something goes wrong or, unless something goes wrong.
Just so you know, last night's pizza party for you was 1 out of 98,550 meals you may consume in your lifetime.
98,550?
Yeah.
That's all I get to eat? 98,550. I feel like there should be more meals than that. Are you doing 3 meals a day or 6 meals a day?
I went 3. I mean, if it's
I think we should add snacks in there. I feel like that number should be a lot higher.
You're at 150,000.
That still seems so, So doesn't it seem like we should get to eat more meals than that? Does that sound like a lot to you? I guess it's a lot.
Yeah, you just kind of shat on the experiment, but to me that feels like, oh, no big deal. Like, it's not a big deal. Those numbers,
my bad.
Every time I hear those numbers, it leaves me feeling like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like,
well, that just shows the diversity of human perception and experience. Mine was not like, oh crap, it's like 1 out of 100,000. I better get it together. It was more just like, I only get to eat 100,000 times. I want to eat 5 million times. Stop taking away my food. In case you guys can't tell, I really do love to eat. And yeah, I enjoy it. And I want to eat more.
So the definitionary that it for nourishment is the foods or other substances necessary for growth, healing, and good conditions, which for me introduces other things outside of food.
It says food and other things.
Other substances necessary for growth, health, and good conditions.
Growth, health, and good conditions. All right, cool.
For me, this is stress management.
Well, yeah. So then last night I needed that damn pizza for good conditions. Otherwise, somebody was going to lose their shit in our house.
And like comfort food has a good place, like in anyone's kind of repertoire of food. You know, if that could be one of your comfort foods, I don't know if that is for you.
I mean, I feel like if I was really going to have comfort food, I'd rather have like mashed potatoes or like macaroni and cheese. But cheese is like, I like cheese because it acts on the same nerve receptors as opiates in your brain. And cheese does not like me the way that I like cheese. So
what's your favorite cheese?
Oh, I mean, I don't even like I'm not fancy with my cheese. Like I do like fancy cheeses. I guess I like Munster and like Brie, but I don't even eat cheese by itself anymore. But like when I eat macaroni and cheese, I like burrata. That's a good cheese.
Can I tell you about my favorite cheese?
I don't know. I mean, cheese doesn't feel good in my body. You know, it leads to diabetes. Overall, just not, it's not loving me back. So I try not to have it very often.
This cheese, if you've never tried it, have you heard of Midnight Moon?
No.
It's a blushing ivory color coated goat cheese that is nuttery and brown buttery up front with a long caramel finish.
Wow. It sounds like a really powerful cheese experience.
Similar to Gouda.
I do like Gouda.
Yeah, it's become my favorite for about 5 years now. I actually was part of my own cheese club I started when I was in Hoboken in 2011. I would walk to the cheese store on Sundays and I would taste different cheeses. And I had a cheese notebook and I would walk like 1.5 miles there and 1.5 miles back. And then I'd buy 2 to 3 cheeses and that's all I would eat on a Sunday, and I'd have wine.
Were there other members of your cheese club or was it just you?
It was kind of just me, but I shared the cheese with my roommates at the time. And I remember my parents were in town once and I was like so excited. I'm like, did you know cheese stores let you try their cheeses like an ice cream store? And I'm like telling them what I want tastes of. It was a weird time for me. And I offer that story as contrast, but that felt maybe nourishing for 1 or 2 of those Sundays. And then it felt like a really weird, bad, expensive habit. But the best thing was I learned about Midnight Moon cheese. And from time to time, I like to dabble in that.
Is that available on special order? Is it on Amazon?
I think it is on
the show notes.
It's in the show notes, but you have to buy it by the wheel.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a lot of cheese.
It is a lot of cheese.
I hope that when we have our Rise to Thrive Women's Summit, that we can have some of these companies that we're so crazy over sponsor us. Please come to our Women's Leadership Summit. We'll feed you all the Midnight Moon cheese. Is that what it was called?
Yes, Cypress Grove.
Oh, I do. I am familiar with Cypress Grove cheeses. I was just not familiar with that particular one.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I digress.
Yeah. So, okay. So food, we're now on the topic of food because we're talking about cheese. And I think food is probably what people think of when they first think of nourishment. But there are so many other ways of nourishing ourselves, but like just on the food topic, like what do you find having, you're also in the recovery process of disordered eating, or like, you have experienced unhealthy relationship with food at one time and are now in a different experience of your relationship with food. I would say a grand love affair is actually where you currently are with food.
Yes.
At least what I've witnessed.
If anybody could tell by the blue moon,
The cheese monologue. Yeah.
I had the most delightful dinner this past week to celebrate Valentine's Day, and it was a remembrance of like the appreciation, of the sourcing, of the intentionality of a chef, of the complete plate. And I think that's something I offer to our listeners is like the tuning in around some of those things. My own food journey, went from a lot of restriction. When I think of bulimia, like I really liked feeling full and I really liked purging to then feel empty again. It felt so much more of like a psychology than about the actual food. I wasn't like super into whatever I was binging on, but I did want to feel really full because I felt really empty. And that was the cycle. And then, I remember like our nutritionist at Rutgers for swimming, like we had to count our like it was kind of like counting macros, but it was like counting like one protein, two dairies, like we had to count. And that felt like it was adding to the disordered eating. And after college, it really started this healing journey and like a great curiosity around food. I mean, there was a point in my life, I had dated a guy where I would have him measure every part of my body, like every week. We would do like a check-in where I was like, oh, will you just weigh, or I mean, will you measure? And I would have him measure my limbs and stomach. And we were like into fitness. And to think of being there to where I am today, where I feel like so free. And I really think that food was the healing component of that. To go from literally standing in a room, like having my limbs measured, to where I'm like, like a good meal, and thinking about nourishment in a way that I'm like, how can I make the most nourishing decision for myself right now? And whatever that might mean. And it does mean pizza. It does mean cheese. It does mean like a candy or a chocolate or an ice cream, but in such a like loving way. I get down with the BJs, the Ben and Jerry's from time to time. But yeah, so the biggest ahas though around food were, I would say, like when I was doing my health coaching and my culinary school, the two like biggest takeaways were how powerful cooking for myself can be in healing, and understanding where food comes from, and just doing those two things like as often as possible. And it might not even be every day, but I found that those two things, having awareness of where food comes from and cooking, has tremendous healing effects. And I believe that it's purely due to the connection to then what you're eating, and that has created like a beautiful reverence. One of the like prayers or offerings I offer around food are, may this bless my mind, body, and spirit today and every day. And I really believe that. And I can't stress enough, like the amount of freedom, and it does not come from like me saying like, because I'm counting my macros, or I'm keto, or I'm vegan, or I'm whatever. It's like, no, I just check in and like, what does Linda like want and need today? And I'm primarily plant-based, but it looks like sometimes duck, or it looks like fish, or it looks like whatever, it looks like a Reese's at Halloween. It gives me heartburn immediately. Side. And honestly, like there was a time where I had tremendous gluten issues, and even in looking back to high school, I had the worst gas and indigestion. I was so sick. I look back and I'm like, how did no one know? But it was before people like knew really about gluten intolerance and the way it's so mainstream. And I was actually afraid to tell people, but I had such bad heartburn. I was like sure that I had cancer. And I would have this indigestion and heartburn that was like felt almost debilitating, and the worst, like distended, gassy, bad digestion. And so that also, that's a shitty way to feel, pun intended. So that was a lot that spurred like the quest for information.
Well, so one of the things that I heard you saying, like specifically around the Reese's, is like, that obviously was not about body nourishment. That was about mind nourishment or soul nourishment. It was about giving yourself permission. It was about the experience of enjoyment. And so these are all components of nourishing the whole self. Like when we talk about nourishing the whole self, it's like we're not just talking about, food matter in becomes food matter in the body, right? Becomes body matter. Like there's other elements of that. So there might be times where what you need to eat or what you're choosing to eat, what you desire to eat to nourish the mind or to nourish the spirit, maybe it doesn't agree that great with the body. And so that's where it's like a process of figuring out your own balance.
Yeah. And like if I'm eating a Reese's that's giving me heartburn every day or multiple times a day or, a lot in one sitting, I'm going to have a lot of information quickly about how my body feels. And then that's affecting like mind and spirit and soul, like on these different levels. And like, I would encourage the consideration of that information. And so is that becoming a bad habit? For me, it's not in that moment, because I'm like, oh, I feel shitty. Like, yeah, that was a great memory to tap into. Like, check, we're good. Like, and moving on back to whatever else is the best optimal choice. But the biggest distinction is not having like the shame or the like, I can't believe I just did that. It's just honestly like, oh, that's interesting. I have heartburn right now. I'm not going to have another Reese's.
Yeah, I think that's valuable. And I think that I have access to a lot of information. And then sometimes even knowing that I have that information, I choose to make a decision that runs contrary to what would feel best in my body, which is interesting because that's where it's just like, I don't know, is that out of habit or is that out of, it must just be out of habit, like thinking, knowing that something's not going, and I hope some of our listeners can relate, knowing something's not going to make you feel good, but choosing to have it anyway. And where does that choice come from? Is it like compulsive, or is it like you say, yeah, this is going to give me heartburn, but like I want it, so is
it purely because it's there, like that, like the proximity, like, oh, like, yeah, it's going to give me heartburn, but it's right there and I'm going to have it, and it being just so accessible?
That proximity thing for me, that brings up alcohol, because I feel like if alcohol is not in proximity to me, I don't think about it, I don't drink it, I don't want it, I have no interest in it whatsoever. If it's in proximity, and this is where, I don't even think we need to slap a label on it, but if it's in proximity and other people that I'm with in the social environment are drinking, there is an internal pressure that I feel where I'm like, oh, this would be more fun if I had a drink, right? And so that's interesting because I actually I haven't been really drinking for the last, I don't even know how long, just of late. I haven't really been drinking. We don't keep alcohol in the house, and I'm not interested in it. Like if I want to experience a little bit of a buzz or like an altered state of consciousness, like give me a weed gummy. I would rather have cannabis any day of the week over alcohol. But I think that proximity question, I wonder like, I know that with a tendency to choose any kind of mind-altering substance as a treat, if you will, or as like a reward, that if it's in proximity, my mind is a lot quicker to go to like, oh, it's been a long day, like I deserve a glass of wine, right? So I think it's interesting to consider like the things that we maybe view as nourishment and or as like reward, maybe even just examining like that relationship of like food or alcohol or substances as reward in and of itself. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, our culture, it's like, let's go to eat to celebrate. Let's go have a drink to celebrate. I mean, it's so ingrained. So I can see how it's easy to do that. And one of the things that's helped me is to understand, like, aside from food or alcohol or substance, like what do I enjoy as a way to celebrate or as a way to take care of myself? And like having all of those options accessible, and I can nerd out about this, like to the point of literally having like a little graph. I have like a mental graph of like, well, if I have 5 minutes, it's this. If it's 30 minutes, it's this. If it's an hour, it's this. But the point is that there's options, and it's not just like, wine or a weed gummy or this. It's like a bike ride, a walk, a bath, 20 minutes of reading, jazz music, like these different things that feel really good aside from that reward. And a funny story about reward, I was a swimmer, as some of you may know, and after swim practice in high school, my dad would pick me up and I'd have like a 3-hour practice. We had lifted weights or done dry land before, and he would take me to 7-Eleven almost every day, and my mom didn't know. And I'd get home and have dinner, but I'd get a Slurpee and Skittles and an ice cream sandwich almost every single time. And then we'd eat dinner. And it was like such the reward thinking, like in my mind, even I don't think that was the intention. It was kind of like daddy-daughter time, but it was an easy way of like, pick out what you want, limit to 3 things. And I'm like, I'm getting the 3 best things I can right now. And there was a lot in terms of like physical output at that time. But I do think society, it's easy to get into that thinking. And I, for me, have other options in the tool belt. So
I want to circle back to that really quickly for anyone who's listening who was curious about that. So building your own mind chart, or like build it on actual paper or on your computer on a spreadsheet or whatever, of other ways to celebrate, other ways to reward yourself. And I love that you made it time-based, where it's like, if I only have 5 minutes, if I only have 10 minutes, because I think choosing something like a scoop of ice cream or wine, and we're not saying don't do that. We're not saying you can't have champagne to celebrate your decision. Yeah.
Put it on the list, but like it's on the list. It's not the go-to.
Right. So that there are other ways. And for me, that's, I think, important and necessary, because one of the things that I've observed, the information that I have received for myself, is that for me, alcohol almost never really feels like a celebration. Okay, one mimosa, yes, I love mimosas. Oh my God, girl, don't even get me started. I love them. Like, why do I love them so much? It's just champagne and orange juice, but like, I love them. That feels like a celebration. But even at where I am in my life currently, even one glass of red wine, for the most part, we could talk about sourcing on that and talk about sugars and sulfites and all of that, but I don't feel good. The next morning I notice how I feel, and I feel like brain fog, and I feel just like unclear, and it's difficult to make sentences. And it's like, that's, it's not worth it to me. So I would love to and I think I need to build this for myself. When I think about, well, what's a 5-minute reward? And like now, because we are so ingrained in it being like food or drink, it's just kombucha instead of alcohol. I love kombucha, and but it's like, it's in many ways it's actually the same thing. It's fermented, right? And the ones that I really like are the ones that have like 30 grams of sugar in the bottle. It's like, it's basically the same thing. It just doesn't really lead to the hangover feeling for me.
Our unofficial sponsor, Grab a Recess.
Oh yeah, recess is good. It doesn't do me the same way that kombucha does. But if you guys haven't tried recess, it's like an adaptogenic fizzy drink. It's kind of like a sparkling water that has some adaptogens and herbs and
Some hemp.
some hemp in it. And it's good. Brent really likes it. My husband really likes it. I was underwhelmed by it.
It helped me get off the afternoon coffee.
Yeah. I've been doing a beet juice that replaced my afternoon coffee. Can't Beat This from Purium. It's like a powdered beet juice, and it's that stuff. I should read the ingredients. I mean, I know it's all organic and all good stuff, but it's like I get more of a buzz from that than coffee. Like, you talk about some energy. Yeah. I'll share. It's not caffeinated. No, I don't know what's in it. Like, I should find out. Like, I just know it's good for you. Same with my cleanse.
It's your trusted brand.
Yeah.
This reminds me though of, like, your body changes every day.
Yeah, that's true.
And
I want to say especially women, but I don't know if that's unfair to our male listeners, but
it is.
It is unfair to them?
Yeah, because everybody's changing every day.
All right, fine.
Yeah.
Fine, men.
They're
changing too.
I think they operate on more of a 24-hour hormonal cycle, and we're on a 31-day-ish hormonal cycle. But
mine's a 24-day hormonal cycle. Yeah. Shoot me in the face.
There's
it's horrible.
There's this whole thing about your cells, every single second they're shifting. So
I'm a new person.
I love that. Happy New Day.
I'm a new person again.
Happy New Day. But you have the opportunity to honor yourself all the time, if you choose to, but every day, every moment. Like, and what I say with that is, like, the flexibility and the grace around, like, what do I need right now? And that could be different than what do I need right now? And what do I need right now? Right? It's always changing. And, like, that's where staying away from some of the labels has really helped me. I think too, I like a silent observer sometimes, but, like, sometimes people that are super on whatever diet and they're, like, super loud about it, and then, like, the next week they're off of it. I always just think, like, that's kind of embarrassing. Like, you were just, like, a vegan and now you're like the paleo winner. And like, what? I say paleo winner. I won a paleo competition once, actually, for CrossFit. I won $500.
You're the winner. Well, I feel like super called out in that statement, not in a negative way at all, but just as the enthusiast. So, like, I'm going to throw in some personality type stuff. So I'm a Libra, right? Which if you don't buy into astrology, then just throw this out the window. But one of the kind of hallmarks of the Libra is enthusiasm combined with indecisiveness, where, like, we might change our minds a lot, right? And so also for me, Libra or not, my personality type, my Enneagram is a 7, which is the enthusiast. I'm an ENFP, but I'm a multi-passionate creative. And so I get excited about the next thing, right? And I'll get super excited about this new project or this thing that I'm going to undertake. And I want to give 150% to it. And, like, it's that kind of, I'm trying to think of a nice word for being, like, psychoness. It's like, that's not a sensitive word for our listeners who are, dealing with anything in mental health. I'm not actually psychotic, and I have never been, and I'm sensitive to those who have experienced psychotic tendencies. So, not psycho, but something else. Where was I going with this?
You were just talking about how, like, you were really a passionate vegan.
Yeah. And at other time, like, I tried to do the Atkins diet once, right? And I was, like, really, really on board for 72 hours. Like, I was gonna do the Atkins diet. I don't know if you guys remember the Atkins diet, but let me just say that I was 19 or maybe 20. And I was working at the time at 2 different restaurants. I was working at La Esperanza, which is a Mexican restaurant in Davis, California. I don't know if it's still there. And I was working at the Pheasant Club, which was an Italian restaurant. Now, ask me if there's anything more masochistic than trying to do the Atkins diet when you work double shifts 6 days a week at a Mexican restaurant and an Italian restaurant, like really good Italian food and really good Mexican food. And so I decided I was doing the Atkins diet, and I literally was working, 11-hour days. I was working double shifts. So a lot of exercise, I was expending a lot of energy, and, to try to survive on like bacon and cheese and like eggs when you're doing that, especially for me, who just like, I'm going to go ahead and say, like, I need carbohydrates. I need them. I think everybody needs them, but I know for sure that I need them, right? After 72 hours on the Atkins diet, like, shit was about to go down. Like, somebody was going to get hurt. It was either going to be me or someone else. And I had like a full on panic mode and went into the kitchen at the Mexican restaurant. And I'm not kidding you, I made the biggest burrito filled with rice. It was just like a rice burrito, like maybe a little bit of beans. I don't even think there was any chicken in there. Big ass burrito, covered it with enchilada sauce and cheese, and then some guacamole and sour cream. Like, literally it wouldn't even like roll up. Put it under the warmer, and I sat down and like ate the whole thing until I was like in the carb like stupor, you know what I mean? I was like, it's better. But the point of the story was like, every body is different. And for me, that enthusiasm and wanting to jump on the bandwagon of like the next hot new diet fad, which was always for me about losing weight, has just led to me like swinging between these extremes and this polarity that's like, that's not healthy and balanced and comfortable in my body either. You know what I mean? So I get it. I understand people wanting to, keto or Atkins or whatever's, I don't even know what's hip.
There's like, I think, into the thousands of different diets that you could choose from. Those were some of my earliest reading, like the latest diet book. And I remember in high school, like I had bought like keto strips, like something I had put it together that if you could get yourself into ketosis, you'd lose fat. And I was buying keto strips in high school. And then when
you were so ahead of the times.
I like impressed with myself because I don't know, I just put a few things together and I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like, if you just do this, like you're in ketosis and you lose fat, and like, I'll do that. And then I was like doing the strips and I was like, oh, this is really hard to get into that state. And I like a few days later stopped. And when keto came, I, got as mainstream as it is today, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I think it can very much be helpful to like spur a health journey. And also, if you notice yourself swinging from diet to diet to diet, or weight loss to weight loss to weight gain to weight loss, just noticing like how that feels. And some of it for me started to feel like a full-time job. And I'm like, I want to live, like I want to feel free. And that brought me back to cooking. And that's really how I started feeling free with food.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a second, because you mentioned sourcing, intentionality, cooking for yourself. And even beyond those three things, which I think we can maybe talk about a little bit more for people who don't have any familiarity with what it means to source. But for me, there's putting the focus on what I want to consume more of has always been more helpful than putting the focus on what I want to consume less of. And so when I start to feel not great in my skin, or I start to feel like I'm not nourished enough, forget, like, all labels aside, it comes down to eat more vegetables, and specifically more greens, and drink more water. Like, I do those two things, and the rest of it can kind of stay how it is, or it almost, like, the more leafy greens I eat, the more water I drink, the more that I want to choose whole foods, like non-processed foods. Mm-hmm.
Real food.
And the better I feel. Yeah, real food. And true. And I agree with you about cooking. The times that I have felt the absolute best in my body, and best about how I'm feeding my family, are when, for me, it helps to meal plan and meal prep, just because we are like a busy family. But when I have especially vegetables, when I have like lots of fruits and vegetables in the fridge and the vegetables are already like washed and chopped and in their, you know, glass Tupperwares and like ready to go, it makes it so much easier to put together whatever it is that I want to cook for dinner that's a healthy choice, rather than dialing for takeout or, you know, going into the freezer and grabbing some frozen burritos or whatever it is. So for me, like if nothing else, like add more greens to your diet, drink more water, and that usually helps.
Yeah, the ability to have some foresight into your week and like having your go-to. So if you know you're going to be eating out a lot, like kind of knowing what are some of your favorite healthy orders, so you don't get into like the trap of like what's the special or what's your favorite thing that you just have to have right now. It's like you kind of have your artillery of what works for you. And I've offered that for people that do, like, if it's work related, you have to dine out a lot. And at home, like cooking, there's a lot of these meal delivery services that bring the meals to you, like prepared in the sense that you know how much of each and you're just assembling the recipe. And in our house, we do that from time to time to just help it be more of a team.
Which one do you do? Because we were talking about this and we're looking at different reviews and talking to some friends, and we're looking at HelloFresh, but then some of the feedback that we received was like, no, their sauces are really sugary and they don't have great ingredients.
Yeah, I had a really hard time digesting HelloFresh, but Sunbasket I've really enjoyed, and we are able to get gluten-free vegan on most of them, or gluten-free vegetarian. That's one thing that I feel like really supported in my personal health when I'm eating gluten-free, and even hormonally when I'm not, I have tendency to get migraines. And so they have a lot of flexibility in their recipes. I've heard great things about purple carrot and green chef as well. And the thing is, like, why am I buying food from, you know, Sunbasket when I live in Florida and that's not coming from my Florida farm? I understand that it's not local. For me, it's like a company that is doing their due diligence in sourcing, and they're FedExing that to me, you know, and that is a trade-off that I'm willing to take for an element of convenience. And that's a personal decision that I've made. The school that I went to for culinary is the Natural Gourmet Institute, and Anne-Marie Colbin is their founder, and she put together the 7 principles of food selection that I'd like to share. May I?
Go for it.
Edge of your seat. So food should be, or could be, based on these principles, seasonal. So shopping at your local farmer's market, or even if there's a local farm or CSA share, which also goes hand in hand with local. So it tends to reduce, you know, costs of food, and it is tasting better and typically fresher.
And reducing your carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Save the planet.
Yeah. It does not lose the nutrients in travel either. Whole foods, where you're able to really utilize all of the edible parts. So maybe doing something interesting with different parts, or using it into a stock, or taking the carrot tops and making that into a pesto, just getting creative. And that's a side note. Like, I've found so much expression creatively through food and being in the kitchen that in a whole other level is nourishing. Traditional, so tapping into what are your ancestors and their natural diet and to your region, and just understanding through like genetics what that might be. So, you know, my mom is Finnish, my dad is an Italian mix, and tapping into what those foods might be can be better for my genes. Balance, noticing your makeup. You touched on carbs earlier, and carbs, protein, fats, and not overlooking also the micronutrients, which I think is a huge part sometimes that with the fad diets that can sometimes be overlooked, unless the fad diet is about micronutrients. Also to check in with the flavors of bitter, sweet, salty, sour, savory. With vegans, often you hear of umami, and that's a flavor profile that has been like a lifesaver and my most favorite to experiment with, and umami being that like bacon yumminess. Fresh and organic, so not artificial, not heavily processed, not irradiated or GMO, free of chemical additives, preservatives, and colorings. And lastly, which could be the most important, is delicious, and making sure that your healthy food tastes awesome. And when I cook, so many people are like, oh my God, if I could cook like this, I'd be vegan. This is amazing. But there's like elements of experimentation and creativity that can let anybody have a healthy, delicious meal. Those are the 7 principles. Thanks
Thank
for listening. Yeah.
Thank you. I actually, I found that really interesting and really helpful, and just like a really beautiful reminder that it's not just about, it's not about perfection. Like there is no such thing. We're not going to get to a place where our diet is perfect, but we can get to a place where it's really great for us. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've spent a lot of time talking about body nourishment and food nourishment. And I'd love to, and we've touched on the fact that there's other ways of nourishing the self that are not food related, but I'd love to expand on that if you want to go there.
Yeah. The other areas, and one of the ways that we were describing this when I did one of my trainings is primary foods versus secondary foods. And actually your primary foods are like your relationships, touching into your faith, career. Those are the biggest ones. So those are some areas that could be nourishing for you. I think of others as like media or content consumption. Your environment, right? Your home environment, your natural environment, where you find yourself, like stress, how you manage stress or don't manage stress.
So like with the first one you mentioned, relationships. So I would love to, for myself and for anybody else who identifies with kind of any of the things that I've shared, just invite, and this is something that I learned.
Physical activity.
Yeah, physical activity. One of the things that I've learned is that a lot of times when I go for something that's maybe not what I really want to be eating, like if I'm going to compulsively grab a bag of potato chips or cookies or whatever, like the check-in around what am I really feeling right now? What am I hoping, what do I want out of this sense of fullness, or like what do I want out of this desire to eat right now? What do I actually need? Like maybe it's like, do you need a hug? Like do you need something do you need some words of affirmation? Do you need some encouragement? Do you need some breathing room? Like do you need to go outside and take a walk? Like and I'm literally thinking of like last night I was stressed out about writing this paper that I have to write for school, and just feeling like there was so much that needed to get done today and not enough time. And I found myself in the kitchen, like mindlessly eating my child's like snack cookies. And my husband walked in and he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "I'm just eating these snack cookies." And he's like, "Those are Tanner's." Like, that's okay. And I'm like, okay, so I'm now looking back and going, what did I really need? Well, one, I needed a break because I've been like on for 4 hours trying to write this paper and cramming, 3 weeks of education material that I hadn't read. So I needed to like maybe take a break from that. I probably needed some water too. And like I just said, like a hug and some words of affirmation of like, hey, you're doing great. Take a 30-minute break and like do something else for yourself, and you can come back to this. But I think what I'm trying to say is like, we tend to eat or medicate or drink or whatever our other feelings, right? It's like something else is missing. There's a emptiness in some other area, and we try to fill it with something that's not going to fill it.
Yeah. And like your relationships broadly, like, is that nourishing for you? And I think this goes hand in hand with last week's conversation around boundaries to a degree. But just noticing, like, that's a great question. Like, is this a nourishing relationship? Could you have some check-in, mindfulness, intentionality around that? And, you can't eat yourself to happy.
Mm-hmm.
Eat yourself.
Well, and I think just that question too around spirituality and career, like that question of, is this nourishing me? And like, thinking about the church that you're going to, or the spiritual community that you're participating in. And does that, I think your initial questions that you presented at the beginning of the show of like, does this really feel like it's nourishing me, or is it feeding perhaps like a guilt and shame? And like anything that's feeding a guilt and shame, or anything that's probably not the kind of nourishment that you deserve or that you want.
Feeding the guilt and shame monster, which is interesting because I think that ties right into physical activity, where it's like, it's so easy to have that be the blanket of health. Like, oh, I'm physical activity, like healthy, and noticing like where it tips beyond nourishment. And that's an easy one, I think, in 2019 in our society, for it to be like the most easy cover up, where it's like, an element of addiction that can certainly maybe be healthier than over drinking. But it can be like a Band-Aid for something that is deeper going on. And that's something personally that I had to really check in about and talk about the pendulum swinging. I last week found myself, I was saying, I just don't want to work out, like, just not liking it. And sometimes we get burnt out or need a break, but I wasn't at that place. I just wasn't doing it. And when I do work out, I feel nourished and I sweat and my body's processing it a better way. And I worked out. And after I worked out, I was like, God, I'm so sick of telling myself the story that I don't want to work out. And then like, I know my body feels better. I'm so blessed to have a body that I can work out with. Like, just stop it. And it was like a switch in that moment of like, it doesn't need to be this like manic, like 3 hours or however long. It's like, do a 20-minute pump or go for a walk or whatever. But tuning back into physical activity being truly nourishing versus the under or the over. And I think both of those can be equally as dangerous spaces.
I think most of what we're talking about ties into expectations. Like, what are the expectations that you're setting on yourself? What are the expectations that you're saying that you're receiving from society around you in terms of, the food, your exercise, how you should show up spiritually, who you're supposed to be in a relationship, and just like noticing whether those expectations are in alignment with what actually feels good for you. And when they're not, like letting them go a little
Giving
bit.
yourself permission to just say like, whoa. And sometimes that space without can really give you the insights to now know what does feel good and what is nourishing.
Yeah. So you said too, you touched on, so relationship, spirituality, career, those are kind of interpersonal. And then like media content, environment, stress management. I think media content, like this is really important, you guys. Like, how are you nourishing yourself or not with what you're consuming via television, what you're listening to, and then what you're scrolling on social media. And then how is that informing your expectations, or how is that consuming your time, or both? I think we are affected a lot more than we even know or pay attention to by what media we consume. And so I personally am pretty sensitive to it. And when it comes to television and film, I know that I really am sensitive to like violent media. I try not to. I'm going to give my only exception is Game of Thrones, which is so violent. So can't wait till it comes out. But other than that, no violent media. But even when
the Vikings.
Oh, even when, are you a Game of Thrones or no?
Nah.
OMG. Okay. So for everybody else who's listening, Linda, like you guys know, like as you're watching it, there's times where you feel like I shouldn't be watching this. Like I shouldn't be putting this in my brain. This is not healthy for me to be watching this kind of violence or this kind of sexual assault or whatever it is. Right. And so, but like, how often are you noticing that with what you're watching? How often is that coming up? And if it's coming up a lot, like maybe we should change what we're watching, And with social media, I I think it's even more subtle because with the scrolling, it's like we're just passively taking in information. And like on some level, you are internalizing that information, and it's like informing how you view yourself and the world around you. So obviously, I'm not saying quit all social media, but especially if you find yourself feeling less than nourished on like that mental, emotional, spiritual level, like checking in with your relationship with digital media content. I notice for me that every time I take space from that for any duration, whether it's a few days or a week or a month, I gain a lot of more clarity and a lot more grounding, and I settle back into who I am rather than thinking about who I'm supposed to be or how I compare to this person or that person. Or it's a very like distracted energy, I feel like, that comes from social media.
I did a 100-day-ish. I mean, it started at 100 days. I think it went longer, and this was 2017 into 18, like that fall of no social media. And in that time, it was exactly that. I felt more focused. I felt more just connected to myself. I noticed my emotions were so much more stable because of the lack of comparison that was happening on such a subtle level. And when I went back, I'm like, well, I'm going back, I'm like attuned to it for quote unquote business, right? And it's just still so easy to like, have business accounts, but get into the loop. And
just because it's a business account doesn't mean we're not going to be in the land of comparison,
right?
Like
and I also noticed, like, I've done different programs or trainings that you have to actually be, whether it's on Facebook but to be in these groups, to be on it. And I noticed myself like getting online to be on the group and like getting distracted, and I'm like, I have to check it, it's on Facebook, which it is, and just the distraction that comes with then being on there. And I think it's been so helpful having those like Instagram timers and some transparency around how much I'm using it. And I set my Instagram to 15 minutes, and I know like, oh, I hit that like daily. For me, it's like, am I willing to spend more than 15 minutes on Instagram on a day? Like I just have that for me is like a baseline. Like, there's so much to do in a day, more than 15 minutes. Of course, sometimes I'll go over, but it's just like, what am I willing to sacrifice? And it, to me, has become like emails. Like, you check emails maybe in the morning and at night, but when you get in the, like, I'm checking every email every second loop, you just have tons of time and productivity sucked away from you.
Yeah, I hear that. My phone yesterday told me, I haven't even set my screen timers or my, I haven't set any of them. But yesterday my phone told me that I had spent 2 hours and 59 minutes of screen time yesterday, which was interesting because I felt like yesterday I wasn't really on my phone at all. And so for my phone to then say, you've been on here for 3 hours, I'm like, what the hell was I doing for 3 hours that I don't even remember? Like, it's like 9 p.m. and my phone says I've been on here for 2 hours and 56 minutes. And I literally cannot even tell you one time in the day that I was like purposely on my phone. Do you know what I mean? And so that's insane to me. That's like, all right, we've got some awareness to tune into around the phone usage. And I'm definitely in the camp of like, well, I need it for my business. And I, in all disclosure, a good portion of my clients do come from social media. Social media is one of the primary avenues where I provide value to people. And so I think, let's like not villainize it, but I do think I posted something on my stories yesterday from this girl, Anna, who had really put a very thoughtful post up about how you can do everything that you need to do on Instagram in the span of 15 minutes. And she actually broke it down like minute by minute, like what you could be doing.
That's awesome.
It was really cool. And I was like, she's absolutely right. And, I think there is also some truth to like people are like obsessed, and I say people and I mean even myself sometimes, obsessed with like the algorithm and like how your post is going to rank, and if you don't respond to every comment within 1 minute, then nobody's going to see it, and like all of this stuff. And it's like, you guys, like honestly, we are being told that and conditioned into that by these platforms who are making money off of the amount of time that we spend on social media. This is the reality. Like, Instagram is owned by Facebook. Facebook is a corporation. They literally make more money the more time you are on social media, because the more time you are on social media, the more exposure you have to ads, and that's their revenue driver. And like, it's just like waking up a little bit to like, okay, so can I be just as effective in my business with intentionality of checking in 2 10-minute blocks, like you're saying for emails, batch working your emails morning and night? Can you batch work your social media morning and night? Check in, be responsive. It's okay if Facebook doesn't give you the badge that says you're 100% responsive within 5 minutes. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes I look at my responsiveness badge and I'm like, oh, my badge. It's like, and I'm like, what the fuck is this badge? Like, it's not a real thing. Like, I'm not swiping to get into like top security clearance. Like, I don't care. It's fine,
Did you get it in the mail yet?
No, I still don't have my badge, man. So anyhow, I think, is there anything else you wanted to share about any of this, about overall nourishment that's on your heart before we take
two things. One is also to remember to breathe, and that can be your best friend in a lot of this. As a quick nourishing break, it's easy to forget to breathe and to breathe properly deep in your belly. So if you haven't took a breath lately, do one now. It feels so good. We got air, our heart's beating, our lungs are pumping. Yes. And to be just kind to yourself in this, it's all these moments make minutes, which make hours, which make days, which make years, which make your lifetime. And be gentle, and you're worth it. And nourishment, food, and anything, 1 out of 150,000 meals, however many days, you're making the best decision at each moment, and you are worth it to nourish yourself in the best ways that work for you in each of those moments. So, I hope you hold that in your heart. And I think it's time for our book club. And we forgot one of the things is laughing, how nourishing laughing is.
Oh, that should have been number 1.
I know, you get that. I'm an improv junkie.
It's so important. I want to laugh. I want to laugh even more. I love that. Yours is just like, turn it on.
Yeah.
When was the last time, listeners, that you had like the uncontrollable giggle fits? I had one last week and it was so good. My nickname is Goose because when I get the uncontrollable laughter, I have this very loud goose honk that comes out like every other laugh. I can't force it. I wish I could do it for you guys right now, but I can't. Linda's a snorter. I'm a goose. But it's just the greatest, like that feeling that you get after you just have hilarious, uncontrollable laughter. So good.
Yeah.
I feel like we could talk about nourishment for a long, long time.
Yeah, especially with animals like pets.
Oh yeah, that's important too.
They're nourishing.
Hugs. I think like physical touch. Like we need to like, yeah, it's so important. And so maybe we'll have to have another episode on nourishment.
Yeah, and if you're not getting touched, like find ways to get safe touch that feels good.
Yeah, self-touch. It can be really good too. Or go to like a therapeutic yoga class or massage. Go volunteer at the animal shelter and squeeze some dogs. All right, take us to the book club.
This book I enjoyed and wanted to share. It's called Pharmacology with an F. It is by Dr. Daphne Miller. I like soil consciousness with food sourcing is something that as a concept and understanding like, oh, food comes from our earth has been really life-changing, because instead of counting calories or the diet, it's like, where is this coming from? I want to know. So this book gets into that and actually interviews 7 different farmers. And it's just an eye-opening, interesting read. If you haven't really considered where your food comes from, this was a cool entry point for me. And I wanted to share that with y'all today. So Pharmacology by Dr. Daphne Miller, and we'll have that in our show notes.
Thank you so much. Listeners, we love you guys, and we are so thankful for your reviews and your subscriptions, and we want to talk to you. So we're now accepting applications for interview guests. So if you have a topic that you are incredibly passionate about, you're an expert in this field, and you just want to get your voice out there, we'd love to hear from you.
You want to jam with us?
Yeah, we want to jam with you. So if you're interested, connect with us on Instagram at Rise to Thrive Podcast, and just send us a DM and we'll get you over the application form to be on the show. Or if there's someone that you want to hear on the show, somebody that you love, please share their name with us. We'd love to get in touch with them. We're going to be rolling out a series of interviews for you in the next couple months, and we're so excited to bring that to you. Also, mark your calendars for fall of 2019. We'll be hosting the first Rise to Thrive Women's Leadership Summit in beautiful, sunny West Palm Beach, Florida. Exact dates TBD, but keep your entire month of October and November open. It'll be sometime mid to late October, and we're just looking forward to curating a weekend of connection and in-person inspiration and education and opportunity for transformation in yourself. So we're looking forward to bringing you some great speakers and a retreat like ambiance and a whole lot of fun, because we love fun. So we just love you guys so much. We're so thankful for you. It's so beautiful to have this space and time with you to connect every week. And we just, we want to hear what your takeaways are from the show. So leave us a comment. If you like it, subscribe, drop us a review, and don't be shy. Come and connect with us on the social media, but not too much.
We'll see you on the ethers.
Yeah. We love you guys. Thank you for listening. Have a beautiful and blessed day. Keep rising, keep thriving, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Mic drop.